Joe Walsh here. Doesn't amaze me, but it angers me the way these elites continue to look down upon us in the middle of America. We'll talk about it when Freedom returns at 5.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So the other day on Joy Reid's insufferable program on MSNBC.
I thought you gave that up. You're still watching it? You're still hooked?
I just can't stop watching it.
I can't quit you.
Well, I mean, just when you next hear the comment from somebody, why can't you, all sides, just get along and sit around the table and pound things out and all the other cliches about bipartisan compromise and so on and so forth. The next time that you hear somebody suggest that conservatives just need to sit down with cultural Marxists and hammer things out, despite the impossibility of that, you may just want to tell that person to please see Fernand Amandi. He is a Democrat pollster. He's also a lecturer at the University of Miami. Here's what he had to say about the Republican Party generally.
Has a large abundance of people who are on chip.
That the party that is pro-pay for play, pro-Putin, and now with Roy Moore, pro-pedophilia, the fact that they're anti-children, is that any surprise? I don't think it is. And I think, Joy, this is emblematic, this chip scenario where you mentioned 9 million children without health insurance. I think if you take a step back, one has to ask themselves, and I think the American people should ask themselves the broader question, what has the Republican Party in the last 10 years done to help the American people? What have they done? This is not a political party. This is a domestic terror group. And what I think the American people should consider when they ask themselves that question with a party that has done nothing to help the American people is to vote them out and consider possibly afterwards locking them up.
Yeah, so domestic terrorist organization, a Republican should not just be de-elected, they should be imprisoned. This is somebody, by the way, University of Miami, if you're thinking about sending Peyton or Eli there, Amy, don't. At least don't take Mr. Amandi's classes.
Yes.
I mean,
I've already made up my mind. They're not going there.
Not going to Miami. Sorry to hear that. Well, Mr. Amandi is. He's got some other people they'd like to indoctrinate into the cult of postmodernism. He tweets about resistance homework, and he uses the hashtag Republican Party. You see what he did?
Oh, it's not like we haven't heard that before.
It's all white supremacy. It's all identity politics all the time. You just don't get people being as honest as Mr. Amandi, and hearing that from a Democrat operative warms my heart because I appreciate when people tell me exactly who they are. So thank you, Mr. Amandi. For more on the state of play on the Hill and the political landscape more generally as we near the end of the year, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Ed Morrissey, who is senior editor for hotair.com and a columnist for the week. Ed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So Mr. Amandi's hyperbolic, unhinged demagoguery notwithstanding, where do things stand within the Republican Party as it pertains to the possibility of moving tax reform out of the Senate this week?
Well, I don't think that the Republican Party needs Mr. Amandi to kneecap them. They're doing a pretty good job of it themselves. They are on the cusp of losing the 50th vote here. They're down 2 right now, although the people who have come out against the bill are sort of still soft against the tax reform bill. I think they're still hoping to shape it in some way to get some of what they want in the final version. They did pick up Rand Paul, who's usually Senator No, but he was also involved in developing this bill, so he had a little bit more of a personal stake in it, and he issued a call for unity among the caucus to get behind the agenda, which, if you've been following Rand Paul at all this year, is just steeped in all sorts of irony. But, I think they got a better shot at it than they had with Obamacare repeal, and in part because they've included a repeal of the individual mandate in this.
Well, isn't Susan Collins concerned about the individual mandate repeal?
I'm sorry, I missed
Senator Collins, she's concerned about the individual mandate repeal.
She is concerned. So was Lisa Murkowski, but neither of them have said that it's a deal killer. I think what they're looking for is a way to move the Alexander Murray bill in parallel, so that there is more of a structure behind the repeal of the individual mandate. But let's recall what the individual mandate is. I mean, first off, it was ruled a tax by the Supreme Court, so it's certainly germane to have it in the bill. But also, all it does is it just releases the requirement of Americans to buy insurance on the exchange and so avoid a tax penalty. The people who are going to buy insurance on the exchanges are probably already doing it anyway. The people who are not will then save themselves the tax penalty at the end of the year. It really isn't going to impact how many people buy insurance any more than the prices already are. So I think that, honestly, this is something that is probably a little more symbolic than substantive, and because in practice people just haven't been buying it. They haven't been buying it. They just have been taking the hit on the tax penalties. So I'm not necessarily sure how much of a deal killer it's going to be for Collins to go along with this.
Why don't we just have Mick Mulvaney just order the tax cuts to be imposed? I mean, if you got Cordry making personnel decisions that are unconstitutional, why don't we just kind of continue that theme and have the acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau be the tax reform czar?
Am I an awful person for saying that this is like the most fun political story of the year? What's going on at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau? You've got two people showing up claiming to be boss in a government agency, and they're going to go in front of a federal judge. In fact, they've already been in front of a federal judge arguing this to start off with. And what's at stake is whether or not the president can appoint somebody, or whether or not a bureaucrat has the ability to appoint his own successor. I mean, this is sort of like the best inside baseball story that we've had all year, I think.
Well, it's an episode of Who's the Boss, really,
No.
because people are wondering, like, who's my boss?
Well, it's or as the Wall Street Journal opined, Leandra Costanza.
Oh.
You know, Costanza, he just won't leave after he's been fired. He just shows up to work on
Hey, I'm
Monday.
here.
It's like the guy from Office Space. I can't remember the character's name. The guy with the
Yes,
you know,
exactly. Peter.
For 5 years, he's just there. He's the checks are going, and then they finally corrected the glitch. They stopped sending him the checks, and he still shows up.
I'm not really missing work. Yeah, exactly. It's rather incredible. And by the way, of course, that is the baby, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, animated by Dodd-Frank. That is the baby of one Senator. Dare I say, Ed, Fauxcahontas? Can I say Fauxcahontas, or is that a racial slur too?
Yeah, Fauxcahontas. Unfortunately, the president keeps getting the joke wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
And I would say that probably not a really great idea to pull that joke out in the middle of a ceremony that's honoring the Navajo code talkers of World War II. I think there's a time and a place for that sort of zinger, but that probably wasn't it. But yeah, it's Elizabeth Warren's baby, and of course Warren and Chuck Schumer are insisting that they set the Dodd-Frank law up so that temporary absences would be determined by the outgoing director. But that's not actually what the law says. The law actually only covers that in terms of absences and unavailability, which are temporary conditions, not permanent conditions. And there's all sorts of precedent against this in the Ninth Circuit and the D.C. Circuit, so they're going to end up on the losing end of this eventually. The question is how quickly will the court rule on it, and how much damage can be done in the meantime by either party while this is going on.
Now, to be fair, that was a compromise, Trump telling that joke. That was a compromise so that he did not do a rain dance. So, you know, you got to give him some bandwidth on that.
Do you think he'll?
I grant you that.
Do you think he'll learn now? I know I could be, hopeful, but from another mistake such as what happened yesterday, or just a misstep. I mean, do you think now maybe he'll grow up a little, possibly?
No.
He's 70 years old.
No.
The guy has succeeded beyond the dreams of most people by being exactly who he is. And I mean, certainly there's plenty of room for criticism in that, but I don't think that he's going to have a sudden
epiphany
change in direction of who he is. I mean, that's just who he is.
So we lost El Gaito. We're going to lose him today. Luis Gutierrez announcing he's not running again. It's a very sad day for identity politics obsessed Puerto Rican statehood advocates, which number in the hundreds here. And so I wonder, though, because, some rumors abound, and of course some of these are without foundation, but it does point up this other piece about John Conyers. Those sexual harassment settlements, like the one that was unearthed with respect to Conyers that has him now facing the end of his career, which is about 48 years overdue. Gutierrez, maybe, I don't know. He filed for office yesterday, then he unfiled for office later in the day, essentially. It's kind of strange. But the larger issue of those sexual harassment settlements that have been paid out, are we going to see those unearthed? Are we likely to see more heads roll on both sides of the aisle in Congress?
Yeah, I think so. The problem, I haven't heard anything else about Louis Gutierrez except that he's retiring unexpectedly. And congressmen do. They retire, and sometimes they do it unexpectedly, and they do it for their own reasons. And the problem with the secret settlement funds and the way that Conyers did it with the one that got exposed, which didn't go through the fund at all, it went through his office, leading to questions about how many of those have flown under the radar. Maybe a lot more than 400 settlements, which is about what the fund has paid out over the last 20 years. And so now I think when we start to see some of these unusual, unexpected retirements, the suspicion automatically goes to, okay, this must be where the next shoes are dropping. And that may be a little fair to Louis Gutierrez, I don't know. But unfortunately, that's the cloud that Congress itself has placed over Capitol Hill because of this Office of Compliance process, which is just brutal for people who want to file complaints.
I mean, they even tell you what counselor you have to go to. It's awful. And then the paperwork you have to fill out, and it's just as if you're getting re-victimized. It's a way to try to make you not file a complaint, I think.
Exactly. It's a catch-22 that's designed to discourage complaints, and it's certainly designed to discourage public complaints because you have to go through this process before you get a chance, and then you have to go through mediation before you even get a chance to file a lawsuit, and there's a statute of limitations on filing a lawsuit, too. So, I mean, it's all about running out the clock and discouraging complaints. This is all a big cover your you-know-what by Congress. So the suspicion that now gets laid at the feet of members of Congress who suddenly decide to spend more time with their family, that's completely self-imposed. That is something that they did to themselves, Louis Gutierrez included, and right up to Nancy Pelosi and Paul Ryan. And for anybody who's going to be suspected of this type of thing and feel like it's unfair, they should look back to the previous 20 years of the Office of Compliance and ask themselves, what did I do to stop this?
We've had a few days here without a discussion of the Mueller special investigation because, we're not CNN, so we take some days off when there's no news. The prospect, though, that there may be more action there before Christmas, specifically a plea agreement with Michael Flynn. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the Michael Flynn thing is coming to a plea agreement. I think partly because his son was caught up in this. Reportedly, his son was caught up in this, and there's some motivation there for Flynn to make a deal in order to protect his family. I also think that there was a lot of potential liability for Flynn, too, based on the information that's come out. I think he realizes that there's some pretty serious risk issues for him here, and a plea deal is probably not a bad idea. The question is whether that's going to have anything at all to do with Trump or the Russia investigation. This could be completely ancillary, and it might be something that Mueller was able to was discovered in the process of doing the other investigation. And as special counsel, he has a very wide range, he has a very wide scope in what he can prosecute. If he finds any crimes related at all to the investigation, he can prosecute them. Manafort, I think, is the same thing. Nothing in Manafort's indictment had anything to do with Russian influence. It had to do with money laundering. It had to do with all sorts of other things, but none of it had to do with the Russia influence investigation, and none of it had to do with the 2016 election cycle. So this may be very much the same thing. We might be seeing an ancillary target coming to a conclusion here shortly, and if it does, it's probably before Christmas time, so it'll probably be in the next few weeks, I would imagine. He is Ed Morrissey, senior editor for HotAir.com, columnist for the week. Ed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.